Hello, this is Jack with Listing Results, and today I'll be discussing the seller's temporary residential lease and why you use it. Before we begin the discussion, let's go back to the sales contract. This is on page 5 of the residential sales contract, and then paragraph 10, possession and why you do it. If you remember, I was discussing there's two boxes you can check here. One was you give possession upon closing and funding, and the other was according to a residential lease. It's okay to give possession at closing and funding if we're going to move anyway at the close date that was mentioned up here, or your property is vacant. But you're going to want to do according to a temporary residential lease if you were waiting on, if you need your property to close before you move, because you don't want to give possession to someone of your house before you know you've actually got your money. I like to think of this as insurance. So now let's go to the temporary residential lease and how you do it. And I'll just go through this as a pretty simple form, so I'll just go through each one. Number one is the parties here. Once you do a temporary residential lease and your property has already closed, you become the tenant. So the buyer of your property would become the landlord up here, and you become the tenant. The next item here is 2, and this would be the address of the property. The next thing is the term. If you remember back in the first video, I was talking about if just what's normally done, you do a 2-day temporary lease, so you can lease the property back for 2 days that you know it's like. To reiterate, you want to make sure you've got your money, then you pack your stuff and move. And the industry norm is that you do a 2-day temporary lease. And what you would write in here, what I like to write in is I don't like to write in a date here because a lot of times houses don't close on the actual date. Maybe they close late. I mean, that's very often. So what you'd write in here would be 2 days after funding. That way, if it say it's supposed to close on March the 25th, but it doesn't, if it closed on March the 25th and you put in possession here March 27th, well, if it closed on March 27th, you'd have to go back and re-amend this agreement here. So just write in 2 days after funding, so it closes on March 27th, you'll have to the 29th. The rental term here, the industry norm is that it's $0 per day if it's just a short-term lease. If you're going to do a longer-term lease, a lot of times what you do, the rental term here would be if they did a 200, if they're buying your house and say the value is worth $200,000, then what you would do is take their total payment, insurance, and taxes, and just whatever that would be the lease term per day, and that's a fair way to do it. But when you're doing a short-term lease, most of the time it's just $0 per day. Deposit, normally you don't put up a deposit for a short-term lease of 2 days. If it's longer-term, you very well might do that. Utilities, I just write in NA for the short-term lease. Use of the property, NA. Special provisions, there's normally not anything written here. And then going to page 2 of the temporary lease, there's only one item here of big importance, and it's what's known as the holdover period. And what this means, should you stay in a property after 2 days, there needs to be some pretty severe penalty for the people that bought your house. And normally what we see in here is like $200 per day. So that's a pretty stiff penalty to get you out of the property. And believe me, that's fair. So, and the notices here, when you're doing this agreement, the landlord would be the buyer and you would be the tenant. And of course, everybody signs. And that's the document. So if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call, and hope this helps. Thank you very much.